Every man lives, not every man truly dies.
Quality product. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Fluffenhammer. My name is Adam, and this intro will be brought to you by the Vortex. If you don't know what the Vortex is, it's the little thing in the back of my head where the ideas come from. It's kind of like a tame black hole, in that it swallows up most of the important information that I need for daily life. You know, sometimes really essential stuff. Sometimes I have to claw back the ability to breathe from it, for instance. But then occasionally it spits out stuff that is really useful or completely useless, depending on, you know, the time of day and the importance of the situation. And sometimes if I'm in a really, really tight spot, I can just switch a valve on. And then it just explodes. And it's like a white vortex of ideas and random stuff. I have no idea where it comes from. And it just feels like the most natural thing in the world. And I was thinking about this when I was doing the intro, or one of the many intros that I came up for this particular show. And I got home, I was tired, I'd had a bit of a medical issue on the way home, I was feeling rotten as hell, and I sat there in an empty room, I switched a Vortex on, and the next thing I know, a couple of hours had passed, my voice was gone, and I'd given 12 introductions to this very show. The problem being that the Vortex had swallowed them all back up, so I only had a vague idea of what it was. But the key thing was how right it felt for me to do that process, and why didn't I do that before? And then I realized our entire system as we grow up is designed to make us feel ashamed about where ideas come from, to feel embarrassed about talking about them, to feel almost like we're doing something wrong in expressing something. And let me explain, because first couple of years of your life, I guarantee that creativity is the number one subject talked about by your parents. Oh, Timmy reads loads of books. He's always got his head in a book. Oh, Janice, she never stops drawing. Give her a pen, off she goes. And admittedly, age thing wise, we were lucky enough to have a couple of years before the education sort of system really crushed stuff out of us. But for 1 year, I was the smartest guy in my school. I read stuff like you wouldn't believe. The teacher literally hurled stuff at me. My 7-year-old self was only stopped by reading Watership Down. The only book my 7-year-old self couldn't get my head around because it was just too big. And my teacher said, this amazing, he's going to go on to do wonderful stuff. The next year, there were a group of people still being allowed to read books outside of the 4 in the syllabus. And I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed because I wanted to read as well. And eventually I was told they're not reading the books because they're enjoying it. They're reading the books because they have difficulty. Literature had gone from expanding your mind to being for the slow kids. And that was what I was told. I was lucky though, because I avoided the other thing, which was art. You see, when you're growing up and you're expressing yourself, what do you have most to hand, especially in those early years of school? You have a pencil, yeah, but mostly you have a biro. And by that age, there were kids that were drawing non-stop with a biro. And they would express themselves and they would do stuff I was amazed by. But then it hit. No longer could you do that. No, you had to do the art teacher's idea of art. You had to not use biro because that was silly. Suddenly those ideas were wrong. And also, let's expand it out. Creativity. The creative idea was now odd. The random description of something special, crazy. Suddenly you didn't fit in with the cool kids because the cool kids just did normal stuff and you did weird stuff. Arts became weird. Crazy became negative. And all the way through then, from the end of primary into secondary, you were basically penalized for those ideas. Now, it's no surprise that A-levels used to be such a big deal for people. Like the idea of going to college used to be a huge moment because you would suddenly be freed and be more creative. It used to be the way that primary and secondary constricted you, and the A-levels, you've got your first taste of freedom. Before, well, university just kicked the barn doors open and that was it. You do what the hell you want with your life. Nowadays, even though younger viewers, you will have the internet, and so you will know that there are those freedom options from day one. Unfortunately, you have an ever more constrictive education system. So the ideas of your secondary school don't end until really you leave university because you're being judged. You're being monetized for your result. Now, if you have backing, if you have that family structure, or you have wealth, you are allowed to be that creative all the way through and carry through that confidence. And hey, if there's people here that can use that creativity with physics or with literature or with science or with maths, and you can hone those weird and wonderful vortex ideas into something not normal, then good for you. I am so jealous. But the rest of us come out into the industry, whatever industry we go into, and the fact is that we are still a little bit embarrassed about art and about creativity and about where the idea comes from. And if you think that once we're adults, we get past that, no, because the working world is actually a regression. It's back to secondary school. You don't have a crazy idea. It needs to fit. You can't talk honestly about where ideas come from. You can't be creative because it's weird. And the odd thing is that we now find ourselves in communities, in groups, where we can talk about creative stuff. Safe spaces. 40K, ironically, is a safe space for creativity. Because in a world where humans are not allowed to think anything out of the one rule for the emperor, it actually allows fans to think about everything.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing is, as I said just before we started recording, that all of that was one of the many ideas that I got based on my life. But the weirdest thing is when I opened the book and read an introduction to a book called Pig Iron, I believe. It mirrored well, it didn't mirror, but it was very similar to what the author had, his experience. So, with all of that said, how about tonight we don't worry about having to justify where ideas come from? Okay, your vortex might be, you might call it something different. You might have 50,000 ideas a day. You might have one idea a day. All your ideas might be focused along a particular interest. It might be literature. It might be art. It might be design. It might be advanced maths or accounting. Or it might be literally every form of concept you can imagine just chucked out there by something that you don't fully understand. The fact is, accept it. We accept it. We're going to accept it on this call. So when we talk about ideas, we don't have to worry about where they come from. And when you explain as well, you should never worry about sounding pompous or over the top, because unfortunately, ideas are so visually interesting or creatively fascinating that they require that kind of language. So it's normal to talk about them that way. Okay? That's me done. I think I really should introduce the people that have been either laughing at me or with me, or
Yes,
just
definitely.
sighing in relief all the
No,
way
in
through this.
agreement. In agreement, I think.
Firstly, we have the author whose book I realized I'd lost during my last house move and ordered it on Amazon in the last week or so. So he might have got a notification. We have Mr. George. Hello, sir.
I was wondering what that. I did get a notification. I was like, "Oh, someone's buying my books. That's lovely." It was you. It was you. Wonderful. Oh, it's so rare you actually get to talk to the person who bought the book. Thank you.
That's
Thank you
okay.
so much. Always, always, and forever. Thank
No
you
worries.
so much.
No worries.
I've got 2 of your books on the shelf behind us, actually.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you, guys. Always. I mean,
Should we change the topic of this and just talk about George's books?
Yes, let's do that.
This is turning, isn't it? This is not fair. This is not fair. I've had my chats about my books. We're talking about Adam's book tonight.
Oh yeah, and the other person, if you've not already guessed, by the fact that there's a video of him in the corner of your screen, is Mr. Ad8m. Hello.
Hello. I'm shitting my pants.
Yeah, I mean, I get this, Adam. I really do. It's the part of the whole process I hate personally,
Yeah.
where you've got to sit and talk about your own work. But you know what? Mr. White over there was absolutely correct. Go for it. Just, let it flow. Let it flow. Let it be.
I mean, if you want, we can always start in the timely
Yeah.
fashion of so as you were growing up.
Oh, so we're going Freudian. Okay, interesting.
Now, did your for instance, did your parents think that, when you were young, you were super creative and you were into the crazy weird stuff?
Oh God, yeah.
Or
Yeah, I mean, the sheer amount of times that I was told to get out of the dream world and start paying attention to what was actually happening around me, But I mean, they never stopped us from exploring that artistic thing. I mean, my mum, she was a writer, for better terms. She used to write for the local newspaper in Sharjah. Did all sorts of bits and bobs, nothing major, but she would write things for them, send it in, and she'd obviously, if it was accepted, they would send us some money, or in some cases a pen, which happened quite regularly, unfortunately. And I think looking back at a lot of the stuff that she was doing, she always enjoyed the art of writing. So yeah, I think whilst she very much was happy with me exploring that type of thing, neither my parents were into drawing at all, into art as a visual medium, which is weird because both me and my brother are both very much into that. We're both very much into the idea of being visual. So I've ended up with this weird split schizophrenic style of writing something that makes me think of a picture, which then makes me think of writing something, which makes me think of a picture, and on and on and on. And the stuff that went into this one, it goes back to like me. Some of it goes back to me being 18. There's everything in here from poems I wrote last year, and art I drew last year, right the way back to song lyrics I wrote when I was in school, which I've then made up a band and attributed all the song lyrics to this made up band. So
There was something I wanted to ask you actually, Adam, about this. I mean, like, it's an odd question to ask, but what shape does your imagination take? Like when you're thinking about about something, about an idea or concept, is it very visual? Do you see the images behind your eyes?
Yeah, the best way to describe it is it's visual audio. So I can see movies happening inside my head constantly. I can always. Best example of this is when I go to sleep at night. When I go to sleep at night, one of my long time things that I do is I close my eyes and begin a story. And it could be something like, I'm going to think about a sand dune. Right, and then my brain will take over, and then there's a foot in the sand dune, climbing up the sand dune. Then the camera will pan back, and it's a guy in a trench coat that's way too big for him to be in the middle of a sand dune with. And that will help me fall asleep as my brain takes over the story, starts showing me the story, and I'll drop off and have a weird dream about sand dunes or whatever, The one of these ones did lead me to have a dream where I was driving a tractor through Hogwarts, just running over the teachers. Don't ask me. And it also did lead me to a dream, and I probably talked about this in the old oil house days. It's the only time I've ever woken myself up laughing, and that was a dream where Papa Smurf was standing on a rain-strewn thunder and lightning mountain screaming, "Zombies, fucking zombies, we never should have forsaken Jesus," which woke me up laughing. So
there's like a Family Guy style sketch there somewhere, isn't there?
The thing is, that dream, it wouldn't predate Family Guy, but that dream is like,
my goodness,
2010, something like that. I think I had that one. Because I was lucky that we were recording the oil house the next day, and I was like, "You'll never guess this dream I had last night." And it was weird, very weird. But yeah, But I think when I say audiovisual, there's never a point where I don't have something happening inside my head that is something. You know, it's
Yeah.
actually quite hard at the time for me at times. I'm going to get into why shortly. I think. It's
Oh,
quite,
this is, I mean, it's something that really does fascinate me about all creative people, because
Mm.
I mean, I only learned recently, you must know this because you studied psychology and whatnot, but I only found out recently that people's imaginations take different shapes.
yes.
So I did not know that there were people who don't have visual imaginations or that don't have audio imagination. So
hmm
there are people who don't hear voices in their heads all the time. There are people who don't see pictures in their heads all the time, who can't recreate movies in their heads. Their
No.
imagination takes a completely different shape to that. And
Yeah.
I was just fascinated. I was just utterly beguiled by the very notion, because that must inform your state of mind in such a, and your perceptions in such a profound way. And you know what I loved about reading Pig Eye, it's the fact that you get an idea of who you are in a very intimate way. It's
hmm
your imagination, isn't it?
Oh,
It's
gotcha.
you
Yeah.
basically. It's parts of you that are otherwise difficult to access, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's weird actually. When I started doing this, the entire reason this book exists is because I needed to learn how to make a book.
The
Because,
fun of
I,
that. Eh?
yeah, oh,
Whoa!
I'm sure I lost at least
It's
3 inches.
honestly so much respect to people who format books now.
Oh God, yeah,
So much respect.
yeah. I mean that. I'm sure I've lost 3 inches off my hairline because of this. You know,
Yes.
ooh. But
What's a hairline?
oh, full head of hair, you man. That's sexy. Um, yeah. What happened with this was it started because I needed to learn how to do it, and I've got other stuff that I'm working on now, which I'm going to be doing. Next one should be out next month, actually, I think month after. Where I needed to learn how to do this before I started doing the big stuff.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, this stopped being a learning experience and became introspective. And I don't know when that happened. I can't tell you when the line was crossed, but somewhere it got blurred from being something I'm learning to do to parts of me which I don't usually allow out, if that makes sense. You
Yeah.
know, very personal things. A big chunk of this book exists because I have had 3, possibly 4 massive bouts of depression in my life, where they could have ended quite badly. But this book exists because I'm still grappling with the fact that I was diagnosed with ADHD. You know, there's a lot. You know, yeah, this book exists because I've spent the last 4 years basically being a carer to my dad when he was terminally ill. Yeah,
Of course. Of
yeah,
course.
all of that stuff informs this, and it ends up being a very dreamlike experience from from what people tell me.
Yeah, definitely.
But
Definitely. I mean, there's so much going on in it, which I love. I actually really, really like that. I love the fact that there's so many different ideas from section to section, from page to page. And it doesn't, you know, unlike many, I sound like an old man here, but unlike many present day products, it doesn't really concern itself with like kind of very rigid coherency that you get from a lot
no,
of similar work. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
just, it's ideas, 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 ideas. And I kind of love that. I love the fact that you can open it in the middle of the book, because that's how I read this. I just sort of opened to a random page and started reading and started
Same
leafing
here.
through. And you can do that. It
yeah,
works. You can do that, and it really, really works. You kind of expand out into all of the various different concepts and ideas. And it reminds me, it felt like, you know, when you are a kid discovering this stuff for the first time, maybe you've never
hmm
encountered like role-playing games before, maybe you've never
Yeah.
encountered background books for a franchise before, and you find something on an old library shelf and it takes your eye and you just start reading.
yeah,
That's what it felt like to me. It felt like going back in time in a way. There's sort of like an old school RPG quality to
yeah.
this.
I mean, one of the things that my art has done. I mean, I'm going to be honest here. When I first got back into drawing, I had this idea in my head I could be Bruce Timm or Richard Elson.
Mhm.
I can't. The mindset you need for both of those guys is very, very strong, simplified lines and shapes, which isn't me. I am chaotic.
Mhm.
And what I realized, one of the things I was doing was I was accessing those parts of my brain that was so engrossed in fighting fantasy books, so
Yeah.
engrossed in like those old RPG games, those like old Hammer rule books, like the third edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle art book.
Where it's not so codified,
Yeah,
where it
yeah,
like there are things all over the place, it's not like, you'll find this section here, and if you go to this page, you'll find this. And I think that's going to appeal very, very massively to people who are our age, absolutely, because we remember these books, we remember this style of book. But I think it's so new now, it's so interesting, and it's so unusual now. It will
yeah.
also appeal to younger people,
I hope so.
What
I would
what
love
was
I would love a kid to read this. I'd love to be a kid and read this. I know it's the kind of thing where if you picked it up as a very, very young child, I think it would really snare your imagination.
One of the things I do intend to do is get a couple of copies and then just hide them in charity shops.
That's a great idea. Do it.
It's just
Absolutely. Give them to local libraries.
yep, yeah, just
it's the thing that if you were to put it in a school library, maybe out of 100 kids, maybe 2 would get it,
Mhm.
hmm
but they would
Yeah.
really get it. Like
They'd
Yeah.
really yeah.
it would be nicked, and it would end up
Yeah.
be in their home for a very long
Mhm.
time. I've got to ask
Absolutely,
though,
yeah.
because we're talking about just sort of where ideas coalesce around.
Mhm.
So what was say post school? Because I'm imagining, from your forward, you had issues fitting into the standard curriculum in terms of art,
Oh
in
god,
terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
writing. So post school, what was the first thing that sort of drew you creatively and sort of got you doing stuff outside of the norm because it had inspired you? What was it?
So, just in case people haven't actually read the book, I'll explain briefly what happened there. So, when I went to do my GCSEs, I was told I was not to do art as a GCSE. I was told in no uncertain terms I would fail because the style of drawing that I was doing didn't fit the secondary school style.
Mhm.
So, no matter how I described it, no matter how I tried to talk about it, I was told, no, you can't do it. And that killed art for me for years,
Yeah.
a long, long time.
Mhm.
In fact, I think it would be around about 2008, 2009 before I even began thinking about drawing ever again, which is a hell of a long time.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, going into college, and one of the things I decided I was going to do quite early on was redo my English literature and language
Mhm.
for a year. Try and see if I could put my GCSE up and then go and do it as A level the following year, which I did. And the first thing that we did in literature was a dissection of the Romantics
Oh,
with poetry.
fantastic.
And I fell in love. I
Yeah.
absolutely fell in love with how people like Byron use language and
Yeah.
play with it. And it kickstarted something in my brain where I was already in love with like the Discworld books,
Mhm.
but going through the Romantics and dissecting them and opening them up, it changed my reading of the Discworld. I
Yeah.
understood the word play a lot. Not the puns. I understood the puns
Yeah.
Pratchett uses, but the wordplay and the use of words which he has. And it's the first time that I realized that it's not the words used as much as the words you don't use
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
can shape how somebody visualizes or how somebody experiences a written work. Whilst the words on paper obviously are incredibly important, you can't just hand in a poem that has no words on it. But understanding the space, the shape of the words, as well as
Yeah.
the actual words themselves, the descriptions that the words give you, is as important as anything else,
It's kind of
if not more
breaking that
so.
school programming, isn't it? Where you are told at school
Absolutely.
to write in a particular way. No, sentences look like this, paragraphs look like this. This is how you construct language. This
Yep.
is how
hmm
stories work. There are sentences with clauses and subclauses and conclusions and bullshit like
Yeah.
that. It's unlearning. There is this process of unlearning you go through, I think. especially if you are writing yourself. And it does tend to happen when you're about that age, doesn't it? You know, when you are kind of you're either in university or you're just coming out of university and you're starting to realize you're reading more widely, you're experiencing new things, and you're starting to realize that the rules are nonsense by and large.
The rules are there to be broken,
Mhm.
and the more that you are hemmed in by those rules, the less of you can come out.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you need to know them in order to break them. That's the thing, right?
Yes,
You need
yes.
to understand what the rules are beforehand so you can break them in the correct way. That's absolutely certain. But yeah, it's just fascinating seeing people elaborate and effloresce into that new condition where you're kind of straining against everything you've been conditioned with over your childhood, over your school years, and suddenly you're breaking out and you're feeling pretty. It's an odd experience, isn't it? Because you are feeling betrayed at the same time as feeling the potential of all of this because you've been lied to. Yeah, you've been lied to. You've been told that this is the way to do things. This is correct. And there's this kind of rebellious spirit that comes about.
Well, I think it's the difference between learning and understanding about something for the simple act of learning and understanding it, rather than learning and understanding it so you can repeat it by rote.
Yeah,
And it's it's the difference between a secondary school and college,
yeah,
university, sixth form, however you want to look at it. The further along you get in your education, the less of learning it so you can repeat it becomes important. And the ability to understand it and reform it and reforge it and bring it back and talk about things in a new light becomes so much more important. And I mean, that was the point where I discovered that Spike Milligan wrote poetry, and
mhm,
Spike Milligan is some of the darkest poetry you'll ever read in your
yeah,
life.
yeah. It's good stuff, isn't it? It's good stuff.
Oh, yes. Not a month goes by where I don't think about the one about abortions that he wrote.
Mhm, mhm.
Jesus Christ.
I will
I mean,
just
that's fascinating. So you talked about the romantics there, Adam. Is there, I mean, is there anything else in like your college years or university years that really sort of exploded your preconceptions, that changed things for you?
So my English literature teacher, tutor, sorry, was an old hippie who lived, I'm fairly convinced, on a farm surrounded by magic mushrooms half the time. And one of the things he always said was, don't get stuck in a comfort zone when it
Mhm.
comes to reading.
Yeah, good
And that sticks
advice.
with me.
Good
Yeah.
advice.
So, one of the things I did, it is interesting actually, because when I did media studies, they've got very much the same thing of don't get stuck watching the same type of films, expand your horizons, which
Mhm.
I firmly believe is not a very important thing to do. But it meant that I went off and I started to find things that were out of my comfort zone, whether
Yeah.
it be a biography of some long dead general, or brain's gone blank here. The history of the uses of fungi in medicine, or whatever. But it led me to some very interesting things, and it led me to forge these very. The best way to describe it is I have a brain like a sponge. It will absorb information at an alarming rate. Usually not for any good use, but it means that I do have a tendency of saying things like, it's so hot out there that I've got an ass crack like there can be an explosion, which gets me looked at. But it's a firm thing that I think holds true, that don't get stuck in a singular thing. The more you expand, the more you can bring back.
Oh,
yeah.
it's so yeah,
It's
it's so essential. I think if you're going to write in particular, if you're going to write creatively, it's absolutely essential. You have to understand, you have to. It's not just understanding, but it feeds your imagination. It broadens the context of what's possible when you expand out into
absolutely.
things that you assume that you're not going to like. I mean, that's the most interesting thing. You assume you're not going to like it. And again, a lot of this is conditioning from school. A
Yes.
lot of it is
Yes.
conditioning from school. Or because of the negative association that you may have with having to learn this at school. When you come back to it as an adult or when you discover it for the first time, it explodes in your mind, right? It just
Hmm.
changes parameters, and it changes your assumptions of who you are. Because you're like, I never thought I'd enjoy that. I never thought I'd get anything out of this or that subject. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's a case of almost getting out of your own way, isn't it?
You're very much so. Exactly that. It's the easiest thing that anybody can do, and people do on a very regular basis, is box themselves in. Yeah, and understanding that those walls there, they are not held up by anything. You can push them down very, very easily, and you can expand out to the next bit and expand out to the next one and the next one and the next one, and before you know it, you're reading about the life cycles of squid.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so sad to me as well that like a lot of this really essential stuff is kind of poison for a lot of people when they're going through the education system, because it's not presented correctly to them, and they associate it with such negative states and experiences that they never go near it again. Shakespeare is the big one. Obviously, Shakespeare is the big one, and it's such a shame. It's such a shame because Shakespeare is amazing. Shakespeare is sincerely amazing, but telling kids that in a school environment is never, ever, ever going to work.
I've probably told this story before, but I managed to achieve doing a deep dive 3 times in a row for Romeo and Juliet. Year before GCSEs, sorry, year before that, and then when I did my GCSEs, I got bumped up 3 levels to the next set or whatever they were called, and then when I went to do English literature, did it again then. So 3 times.
Oh my god! And like the most boring one, they picked the most boring one as well. It's like, yeah, me too. We did Romeo and Juliet as well, and the class next door did Macbeth. You used to do a bit of acting as well, Adam.
Yeah, did nothing spectacular, just like the community theatre in Workington and stuff like that. But I did that. Played Puck.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here, as these visions did appear. It was it's something I'd like to get back to at some point, but with a small child.
No, and it's odd, isn't it? I mean, I had a bit of a renaissance with Shakespeare very recently, and it was just complete chance. It was just complete chance. It was just seeing like a production of, I think it was Othello on the iPlayer, on the BBC iPlayer, and it was so good. It was so good. I was like, no, I'm gonna go and find adaptations of everything.
Yes,
everything.
Give me The Tempest or Much Ado About Nothing any day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I do prefer the tragedies myself because it's just my nature, I can't help it.
Sorry, I'm gonna suggest this now. We need the orc version of Macbeth. No, I'm not joking.
Out, brief can do, because Umis are a very flyer. They're gonna burn on the stage. It is an idiot, an Umi idiot, making noises like my shooter full of sound and fury.
I think it would be amazing.
I think it would be absolutely incredible. I mean, like, you could rewrite the entire canon in Orcish, couldn't you?
You shouldn't. You haven't read Macbeth until you've read it in its original Orcish.
Actually, the Orcs would like Macbeth. It's got a body count at the end, that has. So
Absolutely.
They'd like Macbeth. They'd love Macbeth. They'd love Julius Caesar. Lots of fighting and death in that.
it would be bound in red because it goes pretty fast.
It goes fast.
Oh gosh, now I've forgotten. Oh, that was it. I just wanted to say for people at home here, the idea as well that when you go to a college that you will be freed up and you'll be allowed to do everything. That obviously depends on your own experience. I know from my own point of view, I went through the arts, so I went for A-level art, and then I went to foundational art, which was considered at the time the best in the country. And the first thing that they told us is exactly what they told us at sixth form art, which was, well, because we're a level up, we now get to tell you that everything that you've learnt is wrong, and we're going to show you the right way to do it and to be free. But because of that as well, even at that stage, I saw some of the most amazingly talented people being told they weren't good enough, walking away. And it's no surprise that many of them have found great success in art outside of the boundaries that that those establishments gave them. So if you're at home going,
Absolutely.
well, I've made it all the way through to college and still nobody wants to hear what I'm talking about, you are not alone. Okay.
No, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. I mean, sorry for the tangent, but
No, go
my
on.
kind of writing, my style of story was not popular at university at all.
No.
Just wasn't. Just wasn't. It took getting out into the independent markets,
Mm.
before anyone started paying attention and finding like-minded people, cultivating
Yes.
a community around yourself,
Yes.
which is all part and parcel now, of course. It's all part and parcel of the gig.
Yeah. No, absolutely, it is. This is one of these things that I wish I'd done 10 years ago, but then 10 years ago I probably wouldn't have been able to do it, if that
Well,
makes sense.
that's it, right? You did it now because this is the right time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
It exists because this is the right time now.
Yeah.
That said, though, I don't want to go through everything because in the book you go through various different, let's just say, creative moments or things that you've been involved in terms of projects. But maybe say a little bit about the old oil house, because I'm sorry, most people, especially most people on the Fluffenhammer, have no idea that anything existed pre this.
No.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the old oil house, that was
Wow.
like still to this day probably the finest thing I've ever been a part of. Not to say anything bad about the fluff, but I'll get into why in a second. So the old oil house, way back when, was a Transformers podcast, in theory.
It did a bit of everything, really, didn't it?
Well, it evolved many times. It stayed ahead of the curve more times than I can count, and it's one of those weird things where I look back at it now and see how at the tip of the spear the oil house was for doing so much stuff. We were doing watch-alongs way before watch-alongs were a thing. We were doing audio track commentaries alongside
Commentaries,
things.
yeah.
Before because you get them on DVDs, but nobody was doing them to download to watch along with the film.
Which, of course, now there are entire channels on YouTube
Absolutely,
that do
there are.
exactly
Yeah,
that. They do exactly that.
yeah. I was archiving so much stuff from like everything from Argos catalogs to Sonic the Hedgehog game trailers. It was.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
Wow.
it was massive. We did a hell of a lot. We had Underrated Robot of the Month, where at the beginning of the month, everybody would vote on one of 3 robots that were shit, and the winner would then have a bio written by me and a picture done by Rob, who was our team artist. In the style of the old More Than Meets the Eye profile pages.
Oh wow.
So everything from Signal Lancer, who was a transformer that turned into a traffic lights, to Ducky, who was Beast Wars Megatron's pet duck and was also a spy. Christ, when I wouldn't say all over Transformers, but when we kind of found that we'd reached the limit of what we could do with that, it evolved. It became a pop culture. It actually got known as the Public House of Pop Culture. And when that happened, we were doing so well that we were beating BBC Sounds.
Oh wow.
The old oil house was insanely popular. And it's one of those weird things that it kind of, when it stopped, it vanished without a trace.
Yeah.
It did. It just gone. But during its heyday of 2013, 2014, we were destroying Laser Time, which is the big geek culture podcast. We were getting in twice as many downloads as they were a month. We were getting more than the Nostalgia Critic was. It was huge, and I don't quite understand why. Other than people liked the idea that it sounded like they were overhearing a conversation in a crowded bar and just wanted to lean in closer and listen more.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because that style of podcast, which I absolutely love, by the way, I love doing them and I love listening to them. It's gone out of fashion, hasn't it?
It has.
It's become so codified these days. Again, not to get too sort of old man get off my lawn about it, but everything has become so codified. There are very definite ways of doing things. So when people do a YouTube, like a podcast or a video for YouTube, there is a definite way of doing it, which they do, and they say the same things, and it has the same editing and the same cadence,
Mhm.
just to snare the algorithm, right? Just to snare the algorithm and make sure they're getting the views that they require. And it's a real problem because it is absolutely killing weird, odd, off the wall, offbeat style podcasts.
Mm.
It's killing the regular podcast as it is. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned as well the old house. It occupied as well, and this is taking nothing away from it. It occupied a moment when podcasts and fan created media was enticing enough for people to bring their A game,
Mhm.
Mm,
but it wasn't something that was done purely for to be
Yeah.
yeah,
a
monetized, right?
Patreon, and
Yeah,
all of that sort of stuff. And
yeah,
the thing, and when I say that as well, I mean that the monetization was not the driving force.
Well, we
right,
couldn't.
And
right.
At that
yeah,
point in time, we couldn't monetize it. There was no way of
and
doing
there
it.
was as well, so people would have, for instance, as you mentioned, the fan commentaries.
Mhm.
Well, fan commentaries now have almost completely disappeared because the
Yeah.
20-minute highlight reaction video
Oh,
is
yes.
not only considered the standard, but is actually what studios a lot of the time cater to.
It's
Yeah.
what they're
But
pandering to, right? So they're reacting to these trends.
but people love as well. At the same time, you've had this almost underground now of the long form YouTube content creator.
Mhm.
And a lot of that is not because they want somebody to give a TED talk every single time. It's almost because they just want conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah, they
It's the
want something,
craziest thing.
yeah, something more sincere, right? Something
And
more in depth, more sincere, something that's not produced according to a schedule and an itinerary and
and the
so on
weirdest
and so
thing,
forth.
the weirdest thing about this is, and this is why I am leading to a point. I promise you both. But it's because I think one of the most overlooked things that the old oil house did, that I don't think fluffers would even realize now. There was a thing called the lock-in,
Yep.
which was
Mm,
essentially a call-in live stream that was just chat for, hey, if you just want to chat, we're here, and it would be uploaded as a show.
Yep.
And
oh,
it was,
wow.
if you had if you just wanted to call in, I mean, there was normally a max on numbers, and it was a bit
Yeah.
tight, but yeah, you would literally just have a group call, and that was the show, and there was no
Wow.
topic. And
Yeah.
it drew people in because as well it was a place where they could express.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you
It's almost
think you had
inconceivable,
that, you
isn't it?
had Iacon 101, where grabbing people out of the Transformers fandom to talk about things they hated about Transformers. Yeah, but also doing it in they had to argue their point with me, and I would either agree with them or disagree with them.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and Mr. White remembers. But what we did with that was we created something for a community to build around, and it did. It really did. The community that built around that was something that I am incredibly proud of, because
Mhm.
it never really went away. It just evolved and became something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's so many people that without that show I probably would never have met. And that
Right.
I probably wouldn't know you, George.
No. No.
Through a weird
Yeah.
domino effect by doing that show, and being invited to come and do stuff here, there, and everywhere, and doing
Yeah.
things and bits and bobs, and Christ, I mean, how many live shows did we end up doing for Auto Assembly and TFN? I think it was 5. Yeah,
Wow.
which
And do you know how many get done now?
I don't actually know. No.
It would this year I've actually raised to people. Sorry, I know we always knew we were going to go off topic. It's fine.
Yeah, it's
I
a
actually
brand. It's a brand.
at the Manchester event, I actually spoke to somebody who runs a major like arguably the one left holding the reins of all the Transformers shows in the UK.
Mhm.
And I said, do a live event, do a live show. And they'd not considered it before.
No.
They had not
Really?
considered
Wow.
they'd not considered that people would would react to that, and they'd not had that experience because they were relatively new. And it was like they literally used to be corners of various hotels, unofficially given over to this sort of pull up, say hi, jump on a show, boom.
hmm
Yeah.
Because it was community, and it was so great for people who weren't there, because it was like inviting you into something even though
Yeah.
you weren't there.
I mean, if you remember, I'd often get into the audience, usually to make Rob feel uncomfortable.
Yes,
You're looking
always a
hot,
bonus.
Robimus. Good days. Good days. But yeah, I mean, the sheer amount of creativity that came out of that, we had a puppet show at one point that lasted for a few episodes, the Scully and Gruffett show. Yeah, we had loads of stuff that came out of the Oil House, and it opened up a lot of doors, got me into audiobooks and things, reading audiobooks and doing those things for a while. God, I wish I had that kind of time to be able to do them again.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, it was always a great thing, and managed to get a few of them done over the years. And just the Oil House, which started off as being something that, in fact, I can go back even further with that one, and egotistical journeys. One of the things when I was in secondary school, I was asked what I wanted to do was journalism. I really wanted to be a journalist,
Yeah.
and I was told, no, that probably isn't something that's going to work for you. But it's something worth looking into. And maybe 3 years ago, if that, I realized that I'd kind of done it in a roundabout way, because that's what podcasting is. It is a form
Right,
of
well,
journalism.
It's a form of journalism. Yeah.
And it's just gone around it this really weird way. There's a lot of stuff here which throws back to secondary school, and it's quite odd how it all mixes together, but that's how life works out, I guess. Yeah, and journalism became. I'm glad I didn't go into journalism, because as a 40-something-year-old man, I now look at journalists with the same eye that I look at a bird that's shot in a car.
Well, when you look at British journalists in the mainstream, it is
Well,
basically a form of disease, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's a condition.
But it ended up being something that I have achieved weirdly in a
You
roundabout
imagine
way.
being like Piers Morgan, Adam, or
Oh
someone like that.
God!
Yeah,
Set myself
it's
on
not
fire.
great, is it?
No,
Not great, is it?
I'd like to think
So
that. Sorry.
was the idea then of a book? Was that something that came from that time, or was that something that came from sort of old Oil House getting into multimedia and just trying to find a way to put everything together in one place? Where did the book idea come?
So, oh crikey, a couple of answers to that one, because it's not a straightforward journey at all. So as I said, I started this project because I needed to learn how to do it, because I've got the Hive Desolate skirmish game, which I put out as a PDF last year for people to download. That's now getting a rewrite, getting reworked into, it's very much its own thing, so it's not just 40k with the serial numbers filed off anymore, which is what it was, because I needed to learn how to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
But when putting this together, something clicked in my brain, and a lot of dominoes that go right back to maybe even sort of being 13 all kind of came together. There's a story in here where there's a wizard and a backpack that's a mimic, and the backpack is just mocking him. That has its origins in a thing called the Flames of Azeroth, which was a multi-part story that me and another guy wrote for our school paper. Lasted a year and a half.
Right.
Which was a wizard and a demon called Grotznaga trying desperately to find the Flames of Azeroth, and being hopelessly waylaid by fetch quests every issue, so they weren't able to get very far. And that was the joke. It was, right, finally we can start on the quest for the Flames of Azeroth, and then the next issue would come out and there'd be something else that Mister, I've lost my dog, and the dog ends up being like Cerebus.
Yeah.
It wasn't
That sounds like it would have really worked. You know, when web comics were huge,
yes.
when you had like Looking for Group and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
really making waves. That sounds like that would have fit perfectly in that era. You know,
Yeah.
that strange part of the internet that doesn't really exist anymore from
Mhm.
like 2005 right up to 2010, 2012.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's funny is I had forgotten completely about those stories until the other guy, Tim, he had found an old copy of the Sternburn Sandwich, the school newspaper it was
Oh,
in, and it was like
wow.
episode 3, and he went, God, do you remember this? And I was like, yeah, I do. Do you mind if I run with it? It's like, go for it. So it's like, right, okay. Because going way back when, one of the things I wanted to do with that concept was write it as a group of interlinked short stories that
Mhm.
I would then be able to, try and publish somewhere.
Yeah.
Fell by the wayside as GCSEs took over and all that type of thing, and you start drinking. But then reading back on that, it's like, right, well, what can I do with that? Well, let's turn the demon into a mimic and make him into just a backpack that the wizard's got to carry around all the time. And yep, here we go. We've now got a new, fresh story that I can start running with, and that is something I'm going to hopefully do down the line.
Yeah.
Alongside the entire book where dwarves have to take over from the tooth fairies because they've been part of a genocide. So it's called.
I remember you telling me about that.
Tooth Hairy. Yes, it's.
I love it.
But there's an excerpt from that in this as well, which gives you an idea what that's going to be, and that ends up being a much angrier experience than I thought it was ever going to be. But it's.
Before I ask you some questions directly about the book,
Mhm.
and we start focusing on the book, I do want to ask you what might be a bit of a controversial question.
Yeah.
And it's clear there's a lot of stuff that you generate. There's an awful lot of stuff that just pinballs out.
Too much.
Right. If you go into a kitchen one day and you grab a glass and you fill it with water, and the pressure in the tap is too much, where you don't fill the glass,
Mhm.
it just comes out everywhere, and you end up with half a glass.
Yes.
One thing I remember with the old house is, and it's not the same with the Fluffenhammer, though you can occasionally see it, is there are so many ideas.
Mhm.
There's actually more ideas for the people that follow the channel to actually keep up with, because
Mhm.
they might they might say, look at the channel once a week,
Yeah.
for instance,
Yeah.
because of work, and then there's a deluge of stuff. How do you put a cap on some of those things? And then it turns into, how the hell did you put a cap on it for the book?
Mhm.
So there's a saying, which is energy cannot be destroyed; it can merely be transformed.
Yeah.
Right. So I say a saying, theory, however you want to put it. And so that creative energy has to go somewhere, and it does with me completely. If it doesn't go anywhere, I can get very lethargic and I can get very depressed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That the only way I can describe it is, if that creativity can't go anywhere, it basically goes rotten inside my head and becomes toxic.
Yeah.
And
That makes sense.
it has to do something. So that could be, I don't have time to do something right now, so I'm going to listen to some music. I'm going to listen
Mhm.
to just some instrumental music, and I'm going to visualize something as I'm, I don't know, hoovering or whatever,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it could be anything where I'm playing the RoboCop theme tune, and I've got a visualization of a Mega Man X cartoon going on in my head. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something. Now, it's funny you said about the tap and things. Yeah, absolutely. It's very easy for me to let that pressure just go. And I've got to be careful not to, because there are things in the day where I need to be focused and sensible, doing
Mhm.
focused and sensible things, especially if I'm at work. Although if you talk to anybody at work, they'll probably say to you that, oh no, he's a strange lad. But then the job that I do, working in mental health, means that I can also access that creativity when working with people to think outside the box to do stuff, to
Yeah, of
find
course.
ways, new paths that they might not have considered before. So
Sure.
I can get it out in various ways. If I
Yeah.
can't, my mood drops. And I
One might even say that it's a career that requires it, right? That
oh,
it's a positive boon, yeah.
very much so, very much so.
Absolutely. Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably why I've stated that in this kind of work for nearly 2 decades now. I trained as an electrician,
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, I did not know that.
I was a domestic electrician, like building fridges and
I
things.
had
Um,
no idea. Not the first clue.
yeah, before, as in before I had some very bad depressive moments. I worked for a charity, and my job was to take fridges, anything electrical, basically. If I couldn't fix it, strip it for parts so I could use it to build something else with down the line. Then we would sell
Right.
these things to people who are on low income or were just setting out and
Right.
setting up their own houses. It was a great job, You got to use an arc welder for people's good. It was great. But I was doing that and working for Zavvi at the same time. They went into administration in 2008.
Right, yeah.
At the same time, the charity I went for, they shut their doors when things went wrong for them. And so I was kind of left just driftless for a bit. Went back to uni to finish off, to do some stuff there. And then from there, I ended up getting a job as a part-time support worker, which then led to being a full-time support worker, which then led to be senior support worker, which then led to being the service manager. Then moving on to the job I've got now, which care. What is my title now? It's changed like 3 times. I think it's crisis management now is my title.
Right.
So yeah, crisis management counselor. So that creativity has gone quite far in getting me to where I am now. Well, my brain hurts on a regular basis.
Okay, so a book is something that you decide you want to do.
Yes. So there were ideas floating around my head for years. The original idea I had for this was something called Fable Grim, which was going to be my art with very short, loosely connected pieces of narrative of like a fey world moving in and out, which is something I might get back to at some point. But I decided early on that was going to probably be too complex to really do for a first time out. And I've always wanted to write a game, so I wrote a game in the Fall of Aramis, which I then learned how to set and put it up on thing for people to download, and it got fairly people seem to enjoy it, so okay, right, so the next step is to try and get a physical book. This is going to be a bit morbid, but one of the things I wanted to make sure of was that my dad got to see a book with my name on it before he passed.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Which he did, thankfully, and he had his own copy, and I had to sign the inside of it because the man enjoyed it, making me embarrassed. But then he would show it to everybody that came to see him. So
yeah,
hey, excellent.
Of course he would.
All those things are kind of rolling around in my head, and I realized that trying to do Aramis as my first time book was probably not going to work, just because it's going to be quite complex to put on. I've got to learn how to make charts format,
Of course, yeah.
Ooh.
And you might as well have to exercise a backlog as well. Before you start a fresh project, you've got a lot that's come before.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have 7 projects on the go at the moment, 7 books, which are all I know, I'm aware.
I totally get that. I do exactly the same thing.
I was going to say,
you see, same thing.
I figured that George wouldn't be able to judge on that because I reckon that there's at least a few things on the go at the moment.
5 novels. They're all on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all 500 pages plus at the moment. So yeah. So there's a few things going on.
Yep. Oh, yep. Yeah. I mean,
There's a few things.
and it's it doesn't help that I can be walking along and my brain will just go diddly diddly do. Do you know what'd be
Yeah.
really good? A flying
Oh.
ship combat game based on John
Mhm.
Blanche's old art of the the John Blanche art of the ships flying out of the clouds over the forest.
Yes.
Yeah.
A neo sort of Baroque Gothic flying ships game. That would be amazing, wouldn't it?
But the thing is, with those ideas, you've got to get something down, don't you? You've got
Yep.
to get something down because you'll lose it otherwise.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I've got. I've got book after book after book of just notes and ideas and
Mhm.
concepts and things, which is also where Pig Iron comes from.
Yeah, of course.
And so what I've done is I've made myself a roadmap. So whilst I can work on everything, I know what the next thing that I have to get done is going to be.
hmm
And then I put the roadmap out there. So I've now forced myself to follow it.
Yeah, that's a good idea actually, because it gives you some rigidity, doesn't it? Some
Yes.
discipline, you know.
Yeah, which I desperately need, because otherwise I will just, as I have done for years, go back and forth on ideas. I mean, Wild Growth, the post-apocalyptic fungal horror skirmish game,
Yeah.
I've been working on that since 2020. Yeah,
Mhm.
at some point I've got to shit or get off the pot. It has, yeah,
I think most people who have like a creative outlet or bent listening to this will absolutely get that.
yeah,
They will
Absolutely.
so get that because we're all like that.
yes,
We're all like that, you know. It's that magpie thing, isn't it? Oh, this is a shiny new idea. Let's start that.
yes.
Let's hyper focus on that for a few months, and then we'll go back to what we were writing before.
I've got a brilliant idea for a dungeon crawler game that has never ever been done before, so I'm going to do that at some point. Oh
Mhm.
God, why have I done this to myself?
I don't know about you, Adam, but like having other people around you who are involved really helps focus me.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
It really does. I mean, having someone with a whip to crack,
Mhm.
that's a really good thing. Who's holding the leash,
Yeah,
as it were. That helps.
no, absolutely. It's why I have a tendency of sending people things of, this is what I'm working on at the moment, because then I've sent them it, and the
Yeah.
next time I talk to them, I have to get it a bit further. It has to
That's
be.
right. There's
Yep.
expectation, right? That's
Yep.
really clever. I like that.
Oh, I'm a master of fooling myself.
That's really clever. No, it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant because it is a very real yardstick, yeah?
Yeah, exactly that. It's like the Fall of Aramis. I was talking to a guy in the Fluff, Johnny Gad, name shout out for you there, Johnny, who he was really good in going through it and by asking me questions about stuff. Well, why is this like this? What's this all about? It's like, oh, brilliant. Okay, I
Mhm.
can go back in now and I can extrapolate that a little bit more. And he made a joke about how one of the floors is completely missing. And he said that shouldn't be floor 480, whatever it was. It should be floor 404, department missing. And I was like, that's a brilliant joke. I'm putting that
Yeah,
in. And so
that's going in there.
so as a thank you, he is now in a band called Johnny and the Gadabouts in Eramus, playing concrete music. So,
That's brilliant.
yeah, always got to lean on people when you're doing
Yeah.
this type of stuff, because if you do it all yourself, you will.
It's the notion of the myth of the lone artist or the lone author. It's a
Well,
complete myth. It just doesn't exist. It just doesn't
No.
exist. You need yeah, part of it is you being isolated and sitting there and doing the work. That's definitely part of it. But without other people, it's not going anywhere.
No.
Yes.
No, exactly that. And you need to have fresh eyes in order to tell you where things are not working or where the framework isn't quite fitting.
You need editors, you need someone to edit your work, you need someone to give you feedback, to format it properly, all of that stuff. You need help with this stuff,
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Totally agreed.
There really is no such thing as like a singular work of art that was created by this individual and this individual alone. It just doesn't exist.
No, because you'll either go back and rework it until the point where it's just a bland copy of itself, or you'll eat yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's no middle ground with that one.
I do find, I mean, I'm involved with so many creative people now, and all of them say exactly the same thing, which is if they didn't have someone around them, a
Mhm.
group of people or an individual or whatever, they'd never get anything out there. ever. It
Yeah.
just wouldn't happen. They
No.
would continue to chip away at it and redraft and redo and touch up, and then they'd abandon it and go and do something else.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that going back to the oil house, the amount of times I created something back then which has never seen the light of day. Some of it has now in this thing, but there's bits and bobs and things from back then which I thought, well, there's an audience here, I could capitalize that and do something with it. But
Yeah.
the imposter syndrome really kicked in hard a lot of the time.
And never goes away.
No, but what's
Never goes
weird
away.
is, in a strange way, this book kills the Grufflock personality.
hmm
It's that, because this is going to get real weird, and I do apologize for it.
Go on.
But the character of Grufflock, who ran the oil house, whilst he was me, he was also a extreme version of myself. Playing to the rafters. Very much not a caricature, but he was there to be a protective barrier between me and anything that might go wrong or anything that people might say. Yeah, and it wasn't until really drafting this idea together and things that I realized that that's what it had been. It wasn't just a screen name I was using, it was a projected personality. Which is why, if I did go to like TFN or anything these days, it would be a much more subdued person because I'm not playing that part. And
Right.
and that creature, that invention has been killed now, which is kind of weird.
I think many people think, especially with conventions and anything that encourages somebody to go to an event with a large amount of people, they will often put on a mask, obviously.
Yes.
But as you do in all social situations,
Of course.
but if you then create, for instance, yourself in the old oil house, if you create something around you, a community, you sort of feel not forced, but you feel like they deserve that hyper version of you.
Yeah.
So you end up then creating, and people will say, "Oh, it's split personality." No, it's not. It's just a mask, but it's a mask that works with the rest of you. And so you have that persona, and you have another persona, and it's not extreme. For people listening, it's perfectly natural. Loads of people do it. In fact, con crud. So when you feel exhausted after going to an event, it's often because you've used batteries that you very rarely use under the more, over the top, more social, more energetic side of you that you don't normally do, and then you have the hangover afterwards.
Yes.
It's perfectly natural.
Yep.
So
Totally.
Yeah,
It's one of the big dangers of the way sort of YouTube has kind of manifested in the present day, isn't it? Because there are so many people who rely on it now for their living and their community and whatnot, and it's something I've personally always tried to avoid.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a trap to me.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm sure it can be terribly liberating if you do manage to get like a sustainable audience and you have people around you and you have an income from it. I'm sure that can be absolutely wonderful. No doubt there are people who do it and love it and enjoy every moment of it. But it's always struck me as something of a trap, and not one I really want to fall into.
No.
We've seen it as well with I believe I say this because he has spoken about it publicly on multiple occasions. But for younger viewers, especially from the Transformers world, Flu Adams,
Yes.
who is not the hyper energetic guy from his quick cut, well edited videos. He's a normal guy, he's a lovely guy. But yeah, you see him in a social situation and you see the difference between the portrayed image on a nicely edited YouTube video and the real honest guy.
Of course.
Who is now playing Bloodstock, so that man.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
My hat goes off to that man. Absolutely incredible.
Homeboy as well. He's from my hometown. It's to you.
Yes, he
Yeah.
is.
I always run into. I don't know why. I always run into him at the fucking train station. So we're always we're always in transition. You know, we're always
Mhm.
going to catch a train or something, so we can't stop and talk. It's sort of like, phew, George, hello, hug, oh, got to catch a train, bye, all the time.
My one little add into this bit as well is that for me it's my voice. My voice, I think I know, Adam, you know this, but my voice and my accent is taken from a very confident man that I worked on set with for one
Mhm.
day on a nightmare film, and I have had that voice ever since,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
it is a mask to everything. And it's also it's lovely because it shows me that you have interactions with people, be it a video recording that you put up online, a discussion like this, a YouTube video, or interaction at an event or a convention, or you produce a book and somebody is inspired by it. But something that you maybe just put maybe 5 minutes towards, an hour towards, or maybe a year towards can have such an effect
Mm.
on somebody else, and you might never know about.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing, isn't it?
it's lovely that, especially with both of you creating books, is that I guarantee you 20, 30 years down the line, people are going to be opening those at moments. Maybe
Mhm.
when you're not around, sorry to be
Yeah,
morbid,
so
but
true.
but then they will then be interpreting stuff from you in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then zip it, and then maybe taking that on the rest of their journey with them.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
totally. It's magic. It's a magic spell. It's a minor miracle, isn't it, that you're performing when you put something creative out there into the world.
Oh,
It's changing
absolutely.
humanity. It's changing humanity. You know, it's a real weight of responsibility, I feel, and a powerful one at that.
Mhm.
Because you are going to be you're taking up real estate in people's minds and people's imaginations
Yes.
and their
Yeah,
personalities, and I'm
absolutely.
always very conscious of that.
It,
Very conscious of that.
it's funny actually, because me and Mr. White here, we had a conversation years ago now when we were looking at doing a TFN podcast. If you
Mhm.
remember those long ago days. And one of the conversations that we had was about the responsibility that we have as podcast hosts and as people who create content. And
Yeah.
it's responsibility that neither of us took lightly. You know, we have a responsibility to the person listening that whilst we, you know, you can say silly things, you can be daft,
Mm.
absolutely, but you have to really take responsibility for what you say, because if you say the wrong thing, there is
Mm.
nowhere to go. It is on you. And if you
Yeah,
say something that
totally.
is upsetting someone, it is on. Yeah, I know that many people would disagree with me on this, but it is on the person who said it to have that conversation,
Yeah,
because you should always learn from what's been said. I mean, it could be someone's taking something out of context, and that's fine. Yeah,
totally.
but you know, it's down on the person who said it to hold that conversation with the person who's heard it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
And you
challenge with
know,
that as well was, I believe, and it's weird because thinking of that has made me think of my own challenge with something else. Is the for those who don't know, so there was the aim to do a podcast towards a live event that's still running to this day.
Hmm.
But the concept around it was that everything would feed in from the guest to the event. So it was kind of like a promo of the guest going to the event. The problem was that when you have a free-form conversation with people that are going to be divergent in their approach to any conversation anyway, you're going to end
always.
up with something very much like this, where there is a topic and you might stick to it, but no, you're not really. And the
Definitely
weirdest thing
not.
is that not long after that, actually, because that ended because the result wasn't being achieved. You
No.
Yeah.
actually needed, and this is no slight against anyone else, but you needed somebody who was maybe less creative, who
Uh-huh.
could
Mhm.
actually be tunnel visioned on, we're going to do point one, we're going to do point two.
Totally.
Here is a
Yeah.
Totally
list
get
of your
that.
5 regimented questions. But
Yeah.
I then had to work in a job where I had to actually speak on the phone to people. And I failed miserably because I had to stick to a script. I mean, I
Mm.
was the worst they'd ever seen. And yet they said, oh, your phone manner is amazing, but you legally cannot do this job because you cannot stick to a single sentence.
Mhm.
And I thought about that, and I
Totally.
thought again, it's the beauty of this, because creativity is such a bonus,
Yeah.
but
Right.
it's also a huge challenge. And this leads me perfectly into, so how the hell did you start organizing a book? Because a book is not a straightforward thing.
No.
No.
And how did you actually focus and get it done?
And this is not a straightforward book either. That's the
No.
other interesting thing. It's not a straightforward book.
No, it's not. It is as much a path through my thinking process as it is, in a weird way, slightly autobiographical.
Mhm.
In a really odd way, without it ever actually really being about me. But it is about my thoughts and how I see the world. And what it was, so how I began was I took the stuff that I did for Crack-On Games, all the art I did for them,
Yes.
for Ross and everyone. And I put that together and I was like, right, so what does this look like as a thing by itself? Actually, that looks quite good. Right, what else do I have here that I can put into this? I've got some poems that I can add into it. Right, so what am I going to do with them? Right, let's have a look at some of the other art I've got here. I've got all these bits and bobs that I've drawn. There's a couple of things I can show the process of drawing with. Right, okay. And then maybe about 80 pages in, I was looking at the pages and I thought, some of them just look a bit blank.
Mhm.
Right, so let's texture everything out. So I started playing with textures, and then I started adding in, like, as I say, song lyrics from when I was from many different songs I've written over the years. I've got the page open here. Eye for an eye for an eye for a smile, given freely on these promised lands, which is from a song called Blinded. And the band I've made up, Burning Bridges, there's a joke there. It becomes this band that exists inside the book, and there's, they never really existed, but it's kind of here. Little tagline type things I've written over the years. On stranger moons, would you dance with me? On brighter days, would you sing a song for me? But then somewhere along the line, I started adding new bits in, and what I found was that the new bits were dark. And it took me a while to realize why, and it's because of where my head was at the time.
Of course.
And like this fist I made can no longer this fist I made can no longer hold or feel, corroded now by hate and broken steel. I've got a poem here about the singularity and my fear of where humanity's going. And what's weird is you can tell the difference between the stuff that's quite old and the stuff that's newer, not because of the quality or anything like that, but because of the weird anger in a lot of cases. There's one here that in the land of the pig, the butcher is king, transpires to make the sow and the swine sing, no matter what new of joy he may bring, no matter how far back the set is bristling, no matter the time the hogs are set scrambling, no matter when the blood is set to boiling, in the land of the pig, the butcher is king. But then there's also other little bits like few things are as sorrowful as forgetting why the rage fills you so. 1,000 kicks and punches blur the memory of the original anger, leaving only the fire and a directionless need to burn. And this is all stuff that kind of came out of my head when I was putting this together, when I was looking, I need to fill spaces. And because of that, it started turning quite introspective.
Is it cathartic to put it in the book, or does it remind you of the moment and almost pull you back?
I found it cathartic. I think if I hadn't found it cathartic, I wouldn't have continued.
Yeah, that's a very I so understand that.
I think if it was causing me problems, I would have stopped because
And it's a good move. It's a good
yeah.
move to know to be able to do that.
Yeah,
It
no,
really is.
absolutely.
It can. It sounds such a. It does sound such a pretentious, wanky author thing to say, but it can. It can tip you over the edge. It can have an effect on your state of mind.
Yes.
Necessarily because of what you're dredging up, what you're expressing. I found that with the Born in Blood project. I stopped doing that for about 3 months because it was the kind of experiences and memories I was accessing to write the stories were having a really negative effect
Hmm.
on my state of mind. I was actually not just recalling them and using them, I was actually shunting myself into those states of mind. And they were becoming sincere, they were actually taking over again. It was like, oh no, no, not allowing that.
No, no, no. I mean, I think there's parts of this where I've accessed things and ways I've thought in the past, which concerned me a little bit at times because I did not want to go back to them. But it almost like by getting them out, I've set them free. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
There's an exorcism quality to it all, isn't there?
Yeah,
It's getting out, it's binding it to the page, like a demon or something.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, and so when I was putting this
Right.
together, I went through all of my old bits and bobs, and it's like, what can I put into this? Excerpt from Tooth Fairy. I got 2 excerpts from Tooth Fairy in this. Edenfall, which was an idea I had many, many years ago about, you know what I was saying before about going off and learning about stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Edenfall exists. The idea of Edenfall exists because I was reading up on how they made the Hong Kong airport.
Right.
Right? Because the Hong Kong airport goes into the sea. Right?
Ah.
So I was trying to work out how you create an artificial island. So I was reading up on how the Hong Kong airport was built and the structure that they use. And I also found out that that's where a lot of the original Masters of the Universe molds ended up. They got melted down and turned into the supports and struts for the Hong Kong airport. So there's an interesting fact for you.
I wish you, this is probably the one thing you've never told me about that.
Have I
And
not?
I wish you told me about that because I went out with the daughter of one of the lead designers who built that thing.
Whoa! What a weird
Who was
case of...
just not getting too personal here, but he worked for Bechtel. So if any of you at home want to proof that, yeah, that's who did it. Actually, can I very quickly? I just want to go back to something that George said because I think it's worth reiterating to people at home listening. George made an excellent point as well about during. Sorry, it's the Born in Blood, isn't it? You stopped for a couple of months.
Yeah.
You gave yourself space. I think that's something that people at home, when they're working on creative ideas, they feel the need sometimes to stop because of the pressures, but then they also view it as a failure, and it's not.
No.
It never is. That reset is sometimes good. I mean, my goodness, when we eat a meal, we like a palate cleanser.
Yes.
You know, so if you're doing a huge project, you absolutely need to take time out. And if
Allow
these
yourself
guys are
to have a
saying
break.
that you need to do it, then all of you should.
It's
Anyway,
a muscle. It's like a muscle. It's like kind of like a muscle. You will exhaust yourself, or you'll pull it if you keep pushing it. Without just allowing it a moment to relax.
Yeah.
Every now and then.
That's why it's called lateral thinking, because the lateral is a muscle.
Were video games an influence at all, Adam? I mean, I was just looking at the pages, these endless streets, from...
Oh yes. So Amiga
looks like
era.
this could be like an Amiga horror RPG.
So
The kind of thing that could come out of like Horrorsoft.
yes, Amiga horror games and point and click games are my all-time favorite genre of games. They will never be ousted because the lack of technology that they had creates so much mysterious and mystique,
doesn't it?
You
Because
can't
sometimes like
help.
the images are unclear and weird because the crudity of the rendering, right, and the weirdness of the animation, it makes them scarier, doesn't it? It makes them weirder.
Yes.
It gives them an
Absolutely.
uncanny quality.
I mean, the reason the Fluffenhammer's moved on to having pixel art for its thingy, for its title cards, is
Mhm.
because I was learning how to try and create something that looked like Amiga
Yeah.
VGA graphics.
Well, that's what I
Because
was getting from these bits of artwork. They look so like horror, like Amiga horror games.
oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and there's a reason for that, because one of the projects I'm working on is these endless. I apologize for anyone who heard that. It was either a motorbike or a really big bee.
It
These
was a really
endless.
big bee riding a motorbike. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
could have been that. Could have been that.
These Endless Streets is a story that I'm working on, which is a cyberpunk horror. But it's. I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm purposely filling it with art that looks like that era of pixel art,
Mm.
and purposely using the language of a fighting fantasy book.
It really attracted me, that part of the book. I think that's the part that sang to me the most. I love the artwork from
It's
these Endless Streets, and I love the concept of it. It reminded me a little bit of some of like the old cyberpunk RPG add-ons,
yes,
you know, like the arcology add-ons, where
yes,
that's kind of what it reminded me of, and I love that stuff.
no.
Love that stuff to bits. It's like that slightly sort of System Shock cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Oh, I mean, that's very much what's in my head when it comes to these Endless Streets.
It
It's
looks great. It really. I mean, have you thought about maybe getting in touch with some of the indie developers out there, Adam, and giving them the artwork and the concept book, see what they make
I
of it?
haven't actually.
Might be
No, that's
worth
something.
it, man.
Yeah, I think
Might be worth it because, like, there is a thriving sub-market now in people creating these retro style games, which have sort of modern interfaces and modern like
Absolutely.
storytelling. I think this has got real legs myself.
Okay, well, that's something definitely worth having to think about.
I think it would look. I mean, I can see it like the way the images have been rendered. I can see how they would move. You know how on
Yeah.
the Amiga it was like one frame, like 2 frames of animation. It was like
Yep.
switching from one still image to the other. I can
Mm-hmm.
sort of see how it would work, how it would move, and how that would feed into the uncanny nature of it.
Honestly,
I-
I've never really considered the idea of animating them, but now, ooh.
Yeah,
I have
I
to be
think
honest here as well. I need to make a small public service announcement. For the younger viewers, Amiga is a very old game system.
it's
Very, very old. It's
basically the antecedent to like
super
home
basic.
computing.
When you think 80s, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty
And
much.
the other thing as well is, and arguably more important, when we say cyberpunk, it's weird. Cyberpunk had literary origins that
Yes.
then moved into other media.
Yes.
And so a lot of the stuff that especially like players and gamers now will see as, you know, the visual experience of cyberpunk. There was an equally passionate literary spine to all of this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fitting because I've seen posts today about Gibson and Neuromancer and
Yes.
Neuromancer,
you know,
absolutely.
35 years old.
and there's something delicious in the fact that all three of us, I've discovered today, all three of us are cyberpunk fans. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
My goodness. The aesthetics of cyberpunk I think are amazing. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean Neuromancer is like it's not the first cyberpunk, but it is generally regarded as the one that brought cyberpunk into the mainstream, that kind of like defined what its aesthetic and parameters are.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing book. I
God,
mean,
yeah.
it is amazing.
And at its core as well, it's about people unlocking talents and being more than they thought they can be. Which,
Yeah.
let's face it, I think rings true for so many of us, that we want to explore those things and those ideas. So
Absolutely. Basically, if you've seen The Matrix, it or Ghost in the Shell, or in fact, if you've experienced sci-fi since the 1980s, it's got cyberpunk somewhere in its DNA.
Mm-hmm. Very true, actually. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Everyone should go off and watch Richard Stanley's Hardware right now.
I believe that a certain big swinging D and myself might be watching Hardware as one of our film
Oh,
matters for the fluff. So
oh
fear not,
yes.
folks, it'll be coming.
Brilliant.
Good man. Good
I'm going to
man.
make a note of that, Adam. I'm going to put it in our little group chat that you've got to get this stuff in front of an indie developer or something and see what they make of it, because I think they could do something with this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something I do. Honestly, it's weird.
Would play.
I'm very much considering. I was talking before about how there's just constant ideas. They're never ideas of what to do with it as such. It's always ideas of the concept rather than where to go with it. And that's why I'm trying to do these books now, because it seems like the best way of getting it out. So that's a completely different idea. I mean, I'm not going to lie. One of the reasons I'm doing these books now is to try and parade them in front of various people and just go, "Here's a job."
No, honestly, it's a great idea. It's a great idea because it works. It does work. I mean, and again, it's a common experience. I think particularly for writers, you
Mhm.
need somebody else who knows what to do, because
Yeah.
I know I'm crap at self-promotion and trying to find people who can do stuff with the work. I'm terrible at it. I tend to stumble into it by accident.
Mhm.
And it's only through other people that things start to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they do. I mean, for me, it's largely people like Nick Hardy. He's so
Oh God,
good.
yeah.
Very
He's
much so,
so
yes.
good.
Yes.
I'm in awe of the man. I really am. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he does it, but he just gets into places. It's like a
Mhm.
phantom. He just meets people and can
Oh,
make things happen.
he's almost specialized now in taking, I'd say, ordinary people, and I mean people who don't normally have their photographs taken in such extreme environments,
Mhm,
but he trusts, he works with them, and he comes out with these beautifully, often horrific pictures
mhm.
or extreme pictures that they are deeply proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're
Yeah.
when you're looking at the stuff as well, you're aware it actually doesn't matter what you think about them, because you're seeing the comment of the person going, "I am over the moon with this experience,"
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you think, "Oh, fantastic!"
Yeah.
I've got an
That's what he
entire.
does, He gives
Yeah.
people an experience and he reveals something like very intimate. That's the weirdness of that particular project. It reveals something very intimate about people, and it's
Mm.
just and he does that. He's just so good at it. He's so
Mhm.
good at it.
I've got an entire concept for Nick of doing a load of photos under the title of Shadows and Bones.
Go
Which
for it.
at some point I will need to get done with him. But
I'm sure he would have a ball. I'm sure he'd have a ball with it.
oh, more than likely, more than likely.
He probably already has the props. Let's be honest.
Yes, that's probably true. That's probably true.
Yeah, absolutely yours.
So in terms of the book, you started off thinking about those early works, and then you were adding stuff.
Yeah.
Were
Yeah.
there projects that you thought, I have to include this, or were there any projects that you thought, no, for whatever reason, I don't want this to sum up me?
There were a few things that I didn't put in. I can't remember if I actually did I put Hardworking Space Viking in here or not? I don't think I did. Which was one. Basically, I was trying to ape another style of writing,
Mm.
which was a really good writing exercise, but it wasn't worth reading. There's a little bit of it in here, but nothing major. Mostly the stuff that didn't go in was stuff that I felt was too unfinished. With there was a couple of poems that I dropped just because I didn't think that they fitted the tone, and they definitely didn't fit the sort of journey that this book was taking me on. Because in a really weird and roundabout way, putting this thing together was more of a journey for me than it was getting the book out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that maybe I thought I'd dealt with, or at least I'd put away on the shelf. They kind of turned up and went, "Oh, and there's also me." It's like, right, okay, I thought you had gone, but no, you're still there. Right, okay. So, in a really strange way, I learned quite a lot about myself putting this together. Um, especially the last few years, which have been very, very different. As I said before, I was caring for a terminally ill dad. Our son was born in 2020, got married 2019. I quit drinking in 2019, realizing that was a problem that had to be gone away. Um, so in a really weird way, this book kind of made me putting this together, made me realize that I had a bit of an identity crisis going on, which I'd pushed to the back and wasn't dealing with. And as a result, finding all these old parts of myself and putting them together gave me an idea of who I was again.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Trying to explain things that are
No,
very
no, no,
amorphous
no,
in
no.
my
That
brain. Yeah.
again, this is the whole point. It actually makes perfect sense, and I'm sure people at home as well who've gone through that. Be it a job, or be it a project, or be it something, they all become aspects of you. And so when you look through old paperwork, or you do your taxes, or you compile a book, or you compile a scrapbook, or you look at an old photo album, going through all of those means you review all the bits of your life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what this became. And it all kind of comes down to this really weird thing of, as I say, I started with the Crack On Games art. Without doing that stuff for Ross, this probably would never have happened, because that was the catalyst into, well, here's the stuff I can do. Let's see if I can get better. And it lit a fire under my ass for learning new techniques, learning new things to do. I mean, the majority of the art on here is done on my phone. It's all drawn on my phone. It's a really weird thing to do, but that's because I can pull my phone out of my pocket, doodle the quick sketch, then come back to it later on and start filling it in. There are older bits of art in here as well that are drawn on paper, but I'd say 80% of it is drawn on my phone. Yeah. It's just where I got to.
I think I've seen a few docos and people talk about this because phones are available, and almost everyone has a phone. Everyone has a camera. Does that mean there's more good photography? No, it actually means that people don't use it. People ignore it or use it for selfies, or it becomes less important, and people don't keep pictures. Is doing artwork on your phone a way for you to kind of go, well, I've got the idea, let's do it now? And also, is it a case of, well, I've got the ability to do it, and I'm not going to waste it like other people. I will keep and record it. Is there an element of that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I would say for every one picture that I get a completion that becomes something, there are maybe 10 that I don't finish because the concept doesn't work, but I've still got the saved sketch, which I'll probably come back to at some point and do something else with. Which is something that happened recently, actually. I did a series of a gallery called Dungeon Delvers, and all that comes from the sketches of the orc that's in here, where I've got a page where it shows a breakdown of how I drew the orc and how the dungeon went in around him. That was the final picture of a line of pictures which didn't get a completion. But when I was off work for a little while, I went back to those pictures and thought, right, well, I've got these ones here. How can I make them into something whilst also learning something to do from it? So I went and, for all the people, I went and looked at Frank Miller's art, like Sin City era Frank Miller, how he uses shadows and things, because I wanted to do black and white. So I thought, right. So I was learning from him, watching the YouTube videos on how Frank Miller drew, and reading up on things he did over the years for Wizard magazine, getting hold of old wizards and reading his breakdowns. And then, because of my natural style, I guess, it transformed into something else. And as a result, it became these very silhouetted, very black and white and very dark fantasy pictures, which I've then put up under the series of Dungeon Delvers, which may end up in another book at some point. Whether or not it's one of these ones or something else, I don't know yet.
What was the cutoff? Because obviously you've mentioned you've got lots of material for other books, but what was the
Mhm.
point? Was it a specific page count? Was it a specific amount of projects? What was the thing that halted it?
I made a date.
Made a day. Okay.
I said I put a date in place that is the date that I will down pencils, and that is done, and it is going to be tidied up, and it's going to be finished to be released on this date. And that was it. That date was locked in. I couldn't change it. Once that was in, I had a deadline that I knew I had to work against.
And I know this is all about the sort of creative side, and this is almost the antithesis of that, but the formatting and just the putting the book together. I mean, on a scale of 1 to 10, was it because you had the material, was the challenge of just putting it in a book easier than you thought, or was it
Much harder.
much harder?
So much harder. Because every time I thought I had it, I would see another problem and have to go back in again and try to rework it and try and get it all to work another way, and sometimes have to redo entire like blocks of pages to make it fit how I saw it in my head, which I think that's a very important thing to put out. I saw in my head at a certain point what this was going to look like, and trying to get that onto the page became very important, because it wasn't just here it is throwing it onto the page. There is there was a through line that I wanted. Whilst it isn't a narrative through line and it isn't a chronological through line, there is a through line there that I wanted to have, where you could, if you start at the beginning and work your way through, you can kind of follow it as it builds up. And then, of course, I got it all done and realized that if I had one more page, it would be an even amount of pages. So I had to do that. So I went back through, drew a load of pictures of pigmen, hid them in there with a page that just said, "There's some pigmen hidden in this. Can you find them all?" So there is that in the book as well.
There you go. When it came to sort of putting the book out,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned as well sort of imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So was there a real challenge to pressing send?
Oh God, yeah.
And how has that? 'Cause I'm going to be honest here. You've not pushed this enough. You know it. We know it. By the
Yeah,
way,
I
we're
know.
doing this. But at the same time, I think everyone appreciates imposter syndrome. Everybody. Again, tying back to this being creative and being made to feel guilty for it. But how have you viewed the book since it's come out, and do you accept it?
I do. There's stuff looking back now I kind of wish I'd done differently. I think it's important to say that there are two versions of this book now, because it got released and the amount that was there went, and so I had a chance to go back in and fix a couple of little bits. Nothing major, just little tiny niggling bits. So I went in and did that. So if you've got the orange band around the outside of the book, then you have the first edition. If you don't have the orange band, you've got the fixed. Yep, there you go, first edition. If you don't have that, then you've got the version that I've twiddled with a little bit. But after that twiddling, I said to myself that I was not going to do that again, because it would be very easy every 3 months to go back in and just twiddle it a bit more.
Yeah.
So I'm not doing that again. It's been twiddled enough. There's no more twiddling to be had. But yeah, once it was out, I ran into the problem of how do I put this out? Because in the back of my head, it's like, if I do it too much, people are going to get annoyed and they're just going to be like, I'm sick of seeing about this book by this nobody. So I put it out everywhere on that first day. About 3 days later, put it out again. And then about a week later, I did it a third time. And then I didn't really do anything again until the Kindle and softback versions were available, where I did put it out again. I mean, I'm not going to say that it sold enough to make me a millionaire. because it hasn't. But I'm not displeased with the amount that it sold. It's I don't think it's all just friends who are being nice.
And,
So I'm pleased with that.
and are you? I think as time goes on as well, because it's maybe less fresh. Do you feel a bit more confident talking about it now than then? Because
Yes.
it's a thing that's passed.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's
Yeah.
stopped being your baby and it's gone out into the world.
Yeah. I think if I tried to do anything like this on the week of its release, I wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
It would have been a lot of deflections, I think. But now it's been a while. It's out. I've had feedback from people. People have enjoyed it. I've had really nice feedback from people, to be honest, ranging from the really enjoyed just being able to flick through it to the one person telling me that it felt dreamy going through it, because one of the things I've done, and this is such a strange and stupid thing, I was very certain on what type of paper I wanted on it.
Mm.
I wanted that soft paper because I wanted it to feel tactile. I wanted it to feel interesting.
It's lost on me. I'm not going to pretend. However, the person out there, you know who you are. Well done. I have to admit, I there's a book that I've said that I want to read at some point, and I will record when I can get my voice into shape to record it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's nice to have something where you can find, you read, bang, connect,
Yep.
read, bang. But I'm sure people are coming to you connecting with some of this stuff in ways that you didn't expect.
Very much so. I mean, one of the things I found is there's a lot of people out there who have experienced the same thing about GCSEs that I did and had that same kind of despair,
Yep.
that, okay, I can't do that. What do I do with my life? Yeah, it is. It's a tough thing to have to be told. And I kind of wish going back I'd fought harder, but at the time you don't know, do you? Yeah, it's if someone in authority is telling you something, you kind of take it as rote.
I think the big thing with that is that we have to acknowledge and accept that it's not our fault that we
No.
didn't push for something that we didn't know was possible, that we
No.
didn't realize that you could fight the system.
Yeah.
Maybe the benefit of, I say, the downside of today's kids growing up is that the education system is far more constricted than ever. And anyone
Yes.
who's still in education, I tip my hat to you, because it's very, very tough. And you are also, not getting political, but you're also paying a lot of money to get that, unfortunately, that sort of, especially the further education. But the bonus is that there are more places, more communities online where you know that there is an escape, and that there are people that will review and be interested in your creative energy. You just have to find the right spots.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agreed. It's I think it's very important to find your people. Yeah, it's one of those weird things that the internet did for me very well. When we started the Oil House, is I did find my people. There was a lot of, shall we say, non-starters when it came to the internet for me for many, many years. And when the Oil House started, it did open up a lot of doors and opened up so many things that I could talk, find people who were interested. And it wasn't just about, Transformers, so to speak. George is a perfect example. I met George sitting in a van drinking mead, talking about squirrels. Yeah, that's just how we met.
You had me at mead.
It's all that kind of thing. Yourself, we met through those things. Those doors were opened. That somehow things worked, and we met and got on really well. Although probably at the time you thought different.
At the time, as I think Nicole has put a picture up of our first meeting, you hit me over the head with a large mallet.
Yep.
Thanks
Yep.
for that.
No, you're welcome. There's a reason I don't drink anymore.
Yeah.
I
If
think,
if somebody didn't know you, or they know you just as being somebody from Fluff,
mhm.
and speaking as somebody who knows you, you don't always get a full picture of you from the shows,
No.
as chaotic as they may be. And I've had people as well from the Fluffenhammer say, "Oh, I've never met him. What's he like?"
Mhm.
If there were a couple of stories from the book or a piece of artwork that really sum you up now, maybe a combination of stories, what would it be?
That's a bloody good question. Tooth Fairy, I think, is the main one.
Yeah.
Because Tooth Fairy is Tooth Fairy is a very silly idea, where the Tooth Fairies have all experienced a genocide and no longer exist, and so another race has had to step in order to continue that, which are the dwarves, because dwarves don't exist as they used to in folklore.
Mm.
So they've had to find a new job, in the same way that I've got trolls who are Santa Claus's little elves. Now, that's the silly concept, and that's the base idea. What Tooth Fairy is loss. It is having to come to terms with earth-shaking moments in your life, and either deciding to move forward or to deal with them. And the main character, Grin, and his trusty little 14-year-old girl sidekick, they are both moving forward, trying to find their place in the world after they've both experienced massive changes in their lives. In Grin's case, it is PTSD from a. I'm not going to get into the full story of it here, but it's all connected in with the reason the Tooth Fairies are dead. For Elsa's case, it's more discovering that she's not who she thought she was, and her entire history that she has in her head is false. It's not real, because she's only ever been told half the story of her life. They are connected by another character who dies quite early on, who is a fellow dwarf of Grin, but also the illegitimate father of Elsa. And they're also both trying to deal with his loss in different ways. And it's very much, it's angry, I think, is a really good way of putting it. It's a very for the silly concept, it's an angry story, and it's all about that moment in the late at night where you just want to rage against the universe, but the universe doesn't care because it is vast and you are small. That doesn't in any way lessen the pain that you feel. So I think in a lot of ways that is very much where I am as a person these days, where I am dealing with things that happened long ago, which I thought I dealt with, but what's happened over the last few years has proven that I haven't, and it's brought up a lot of stuff that I've had to, gone to therapy and stuff like that. I won't get into all of that here. But that is probably the closest thing in there to being a true representation of me. But on the other hand, the part of me that is that likes making people laugh, that likes making people enjoy themselves, that would be the wizard and the mimic, which is silly. It's very silly. It's not a serious tale in any way, shape, or form. It's there to be entertaining, because I like to entertain. I like to make people smile.
Moving forward from this, because this has it's certainly not closed any chapters on your life, but it's allowed you to process a lot, and it sounds like you have moved forward. I'm not going to say everything is ticked off the list, no, but
no.
But so the next project, which obviously is coming up, How will that differ in terms of tone? Is there a different side of you being expressed, or is it just is the subject matter the main difference?
And the subject matter for the Hive Desolate it's world building, which is something I've done for years. I've done countless RPGs. I've made countless skirmish games over the years, and made things for people to play and to entertain and enjoy. I've written more RPGs than I can even begin to imagine to count. So that this is the exploration of the world building. It is silly, very, very, very silly at times, but it's also got an undercurrent of horror to it, which, whilst it doesn't play with any real themes that are personal, it is playing with themes of things that I do find unsettling. Whether that be cults or whether that is the idea of body modification against somebody's will. There's an idea that runs through it of the theft of choice, which is that it's the only crime that could ever really exist is the theft of choice. What you steal removes the choice that somebody have to do something with themselves, with other people, or with an item or a place. So that kind of plays through that a lot, where there's all these people who have just vanished overnight and the theft of choice that they've had, which is probably a lot more weird and pompous than I kind of make it sound in the book.
No, not at all. But it does sound, though, because the first one is done, the second one is a project with a fixed end,
yes,
and it. So does it feel better structured in your head?
Yes, massively so. Yeah. It's I know how this one goes because it's set out. It has to be set out because that's the nature of what it is. Background, delving into the background, rules. It's a game. There's not much more than that. It is all very, very regimented because it has to be in order to be what it is. Whilst something like These Endless Streets is going to be a lot more freeform because it's a the way I've been describing it to people is it's like a fighting fantasy book without the ability to choose the page, or like a game walkthrough for a game that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So Endless Streets is going to be the one I'm really looking forward to seeing how people react to, because it is so odd. It's a strange beast. And I know it's strange, but then that again is very much tunneling out what's inside my head and pouring it onto the page and making something with it, rather than Fluffenhammer, which is, here's a bunch of concepts that I've had floating around for years. I've combined them all and I've made a singular whole out of it all.
Yeah. You mentioned as well soft cover. So what's the current availability of the book? Just so that I'm clear.
Yeah, Pig Iron is out in hardback,
okay,
softback, and Kindle.
With the Kindle,
mm-hmm.
how does that impact the graphics? Again, sorry, this is an area I don't know anything about. So
I have gone into great depth to make sure it doesn't compress the graphics too much. It has been a freaking nightmare to get that to work, because bloody hell, Kindle is not built for artwork at all. So I've had to do a lot of real interesting tricks to make that work. But it does now. It seems to work really well, thankfully.
And you're happy with the soft cover as well, because
yes,
that's good to know. Fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, the hardcover is the way everyone should read it, but the soft cover is there. But it does the trick. It doesn't have the same weird paper texture because it can't, because it's soft cover.
Now, before we get, because I think we need to probably close up at some point, but before we hit 4 hours, I think we've already passed that actually. But is there anything though that you would like? So 2-part question. First, is there anything that you would like somebody who knows you, might have known you for a while, but is still unsure about the book? What would you say about to them to get them to buy the book? And also somebody who doesn't know you at all, and therefore is like, well, I still don't quite get this. What would you say to them to get them to buy the book?
To someone who knows me, I would probably say this is as pure as unfiltered me as you're ever going to get. So enjoy. And somebody who doesn't know me, I would say if you have an enjoyment of that 80s fantasy sci-fi feel that you'd see in like Dragon Magazine or Starfarer or something like that, then that's very much where this has ended up. Not on purpose, but that's kind of where it's ended up. If you're a fan of RPGs and fighting fantasy, that's kind of the ballpark in which it's kind of fallen into. Just for a style or a theme or a feel. Also, it's not that expensive. It's too bad, you know.
By the way, you realise that since you switched the camera on, the your headset has been given a slightly religious halo type effect over you, and it's keep it going. It's fine. No, that just makes your throat look as though it's got some weird boil. But yeah. I'm before as we close, because I think we've covered everything we want to cover. First off, I want to thank both of you for allowing me to do this.
No, it's been
Obviously, I want to thank George hugely because I knew he was going to bring his own stuff as an author into this.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, listening to this is almost a podcast of two different conversations.
Yes.
Because I've sort of stepped in on the first part to keep you guys vaguely going on something near the target topic. But at the same time, it's been fantastic. A lot of what George has said as well has been so validating, I think, for things that I've often wondered about. So, and then just this last bit, I think the nicest thing about this is both of you have gone into all the detail that you would want to go into, and it has not sounded like you would fear at all. It has all sounded exactly as it should be, which is people speaking their mind about where ideas come. And hopefully people at home listening to this will maybe be a bit more confident and help them bring out their own ideas when they have stuff. So there we go.
Yeah, and I'm quite glad that my first ever time trying to do something like this was with you and George. I didn't even have to use my safe word.
Not yet. There's still the publishing after party, which we've yet to set up. But anyway, thanks to
my safe word is Coco Melon.
My safe word is Nike because I'd never go there.
My safe word is Wolverhampton because I'd never go there.
If you can hear, there's actually a police car going by right now. So on that note, thank you to everyone if you've listened to this. Could you do us a favor though and just let me know via a comment that you've listened to this? I would just for once, I'd like to see who's made it all the way through, even if it is in segments. Mostly so I can give you a hug when I see you next. And yeah, I think that's it. We'll say goodbye, and we'll see you all soon. I know it's almost redundant now, but where do we catch your stuff on the internet?
You all know where the Fluffenhammer stuff is. It's fluffenhammer.com, and it's just search for the Fluffenhammer on any social media site, and we are there. Just come and find us. But my own personal stuff, you can come to adnickel.weebly.com, and that is my personal website with my art. You can download the Fall of Aramis from it. You can download my audiobook stuff from it. It's everything's there for all the stuff that I've done over the years. It's all there.
As for me, I'm the outlet I have is oddly Instagram. but that's my photographs, and that's just Ad8m White on Instagram, and you'll just see lots of pictures of rusty buildings and dark alleyways, and that's about it. And then I suppose I need to quickly grab George's details. Bear with me.
You can find George on Exaggerated Elegy on Twitter and YouTube, and Elucidated Elegy, I think, on anything else. Yeah, you can also find me on the Fluffenhammer. Go to the Fluffenhammer site, scroll down on the main page, and you'll find all of George's links.
Right, you guys take care. Speak to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Fluffenhammer production. Come join us at thefluffenhammer.com. Find us on all social media. You are now a Fluffer.
We have destroyed that which offended the Emperor. Victory for the righteous!